I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may—" Clifton didn't wait. He didn't kiss her. Instead, he reached for her hand again, raised it with a quiet authority, and led her back down the aisle. The applause was polite, dazed, scattered. Callista walked like a statue, barely able to lift her feet as her veil fluttered around her shoulders. Her entire body was humming with disbelief. What had just happened? At the end of the aisle, Zara rushed toward her. "Callista, what the actual—" she started, her whisper half-scream. Clifton cut in. "She needs space. We'll talk later." Callista stared at her lap. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. Clifton was looking out the window, but his jaw flexed. "Because my brother is a coward, and you deserve better than to be humiliated in front of the nation." "That doesn't answer my question." He turned then, meeting her eyes. "I did it to protect you, and to protect the Dyke name." Ah, there it was, the truth she'd been bracing for. So this was damage control. "Yes," he said honestly, "but not only that." Callista folded her arms across her lap. "So what now? We just pretend to be married?" "No pretending," he said. "We are married. Legally. You have my word. I won't ask anything of you. You can live in the estate, keep your independence, continue your art. We'll be partners in name only, if that's what you want." "And what do you want, Clifton?" There was a pause. He looked ahead again. "I haven't decided yet." Mrs. Rosaline was waiting. She stood like a queen on the landing, arms crossed, her gel twisted with tight precision, her beaded gown glistening with disapproval. "Clifton," she said coolly, "we need to talk. Now." Clifton's expression didn't change. "Later. I won't let you drag our family name further down because of a sentimental impulse." He moved toward the stairs, Callista still beside him. "Then don't follow us." Mrs. Rosaline's jaw dropped, but she said nothing. Clifton led Callista down the east wing, past a row of heavy doors. He paused at one, her new room. The grand ballroom of the Eden Royale Hotel in Banana Island shimmered like something out of a Nollywood fairy tale. Chandeliers floated above like inverted crystal waterfalls, casting a radiant glow that danced off arches draped in fresh white orchids and hydrangeas. Every detail had been chosen to reflect elegance and wealth: the clinking of champagne glasses, the whisper of silk gowns, the scent of imported French perfume that lingered in the air like a promise. It was the wedding of the season, a union set to tie together two of Lagos's most powerful families. But for Callista Nwosu, the 28-year-old bride standing at the edge of the aisle, none of that mattered now. She wasn't thinking about the 300 guests, Lagos elites, billionaires' wives, and society bloggers, all seated in rows of gold-trimmed Chiavari chairs. Nor did she notice the harsh gleam of camera lenses ready to flash at the first sign of scandal. Her entire world at that moment was the red-carpeted aisle stretching toward the altar. Callista's fingers skimmed the intricate lace of her ivory gown, a sleek yet modest piece she'd chosen against Jessie Dyke's more flamboyant suggestions. Her dark natural curls were tucked into a simple low bun, a single pearl pin glinting at the center. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with cautious hope as the string quartet launched into a soft Yoruba rendition of Canon in D. She took her first step, breath-hitching. She wasn't from the powerful circles that orbited Banana Island. She was a freelance painter from Surulere, raised in a two-bedroom flat above her father's now shuttered printing press. Her journey had been paved with grit, late nights sketching under candlelight during NEPA outages, selling portraits at markets, and eventually making enough to exhibit a solo collection in Victoria Island. Her art had caught Jesse's eye during an exhibition fundraiser. He was the charming son of Mrs. Rosaline Dyke, matriarch of the Dyke Empire, which included Dyke Group Holdings, real estate, fintech, and everything else money could buy in Nigeria. Jesse had walked into her life like a whirlwind of tuxedos and private jet invitations, his golden skin and easy smile melting every defense she'd built. A whirlwind romance followed. Now she was minutes from becoming a Dyke. The guests rose. Callista caught sight of Zara O'Con, her best friend, seated at the front. Zara was a fiery journalist, infamous for her sharp pen and her even sharper tongue. She winked at Callista, offering a thumbs up that made her exhale. Just a little. It was Zara who'd warned her about Jesse's Playboy past, but had stood by her when Callista insisted she'd seen a softer, better version of him. Further back, Mrs. Rosaline Dyke saw in a beaded wine-colored gown, her expression unreadable. She'd orchestrated much of the wedding, but her approval had always come with a tinge of quiet condescension. Her son's marriage to an ordinary girl from Surulere was not the match she'd imagined, but Jesse had been firm. He wanted Callista. Except now at the altar, Jesse was nowhere to be found. The officiant stood alone, glancing toward the doors. The guests stirred uncomfortably, whispers rising like a low tide. Callista's steps slowed, her slippers catching slightly on the red rug. Her heart pounded. She scanned the room, confusion gripping her chest. Where was Jesse? Panic slithered up her spine. She remembered the morning her mother left. A single note on the kitchen table. I can't do this anymore. That same hollowness now returned. But this was Jesse. He wouldn't vanish. Not after the nights they danced barefoot on her apartment floor. The promises whispered in her ear, the painting he'd commissioned of her asleep, saying he wanted to wake up to it every day. Zara rose suddenly, weaving through the aisle like a woman possessed. She reached Callista, face pale and tight. Without a word, she pressed a crumpled note into Callista's palm. Callista's breath snagged. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. I'm sorry, I can't do this. Jesse. Time stopped. The music faded. Gasps erupted. Phones rose into the air. Callista's vision blurred. Her knees threatened to give way. Around her, murmurs spread like wildfire. One of the bloggers whispered gleefully into her recorder. Somewhere she heard Mrs. Rosaline mutter, "Foolish boy." A photographer zoomed in, the lens catching every flicker of her devastation. She swayed, her chest tightening painfully. Her dreams had just unraveled in the most public way possible. Callista could already see the headlines. Jesse Dyke jilts bride at Banana Island altar. She wanted to crumble, to run, to vanish. But then, someone grabbed her hand. It was warm, firm, steady. She looked up and gasped. Clifton Keene Dyke, Jesse's older brother, the infamous CEO of Dyke Group Holdings. A man as feared as he was, admired. Unlike Jesse's golden glow, Clifton was forged of shadows. Tall, dark, sharp-jawed, and notoriously private. She had met him only twice, once at a tense dinner where he'd barely spoken, and once again when he'd offered a curt nod at their engagement party. Now, standing beside her in a crisp black agbada trimmed in gold, he radiated control, power, and something else she couldn't place. His voice cut through the room like a dagger. There will be a wedding today. The crowd gasped again. Some rose, others froze. Clifton turned to her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes softened. If Jesse won't be man enough to marry you, he said, voice low, then I will. Callista stared at him, stunned. She glanced at Zara, whose wide eyes mirrored her own disbelief. Mrs. Rosaline rose, lips parted in protest, but Clifton raised a single hand. She froze. The tension was unbearable. Callista's pulse thundered. She didn't know this man, didn't trust him, but the pity in the guest's eyes burned more than anything. If she left now, she'd always be the abandoned bride. A whisper, a joke. She turned to Clifton. Why? She asked, her voice barely audible. He leaned closer. His voice was a whisper against the chaos. Because you don't deserve this. Let me help you. The officiant cleared his throat, stunned but obedient. Shall we proceed? Callista's throat tightened. Her entire life had changed in seconds, but somewhere deep inside a spark ignited. Fury, pride, defiance. Jesse had left her broken. But she wouldn't stay broken. She straightened her shoulders. Okay, she whispered. Clifton nodded. The music resumed. And just like that, Callista Nwosu, the girl from Surulere, took the arm of the most powerful man in Lagos and stepped into a future no one, not even she, could have imagined. The grand ballroom of Eden Royale fell into an uneasy silence, like the moment just before a storm breaks. All eyes followed Callista Nwosu and Clifton Ken Dyke as they stood at the altar, her hand in his, the string quartet picking up the shattered pieces of Canon in D like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Callista could still feel the heat of humiliation rising in her chest. Her heart pounded beneath the satin bodice of her dress, not from love, but from shock, confusion, and disbelief. Jesse's note, 4 words that cut deeper than any knife, still echoed in her mind. I'm sorry. I can't. And now she stood before a crowd of Nigeria's most elite, about to say vows to a man she barely knew. A man whose presence always felt like a thundercloud, imposing, cold, but impossibly steady. Clifton Dyke. As the officiant nervously opened the ceremonial book again, Callista's fingers trembled within Clifton's firm grasp. He leaned slightly toward her, his voice just for her ears. Breathe, Callista. You're not alone. She didn't respond. Couldn't. She scanned the room and saw Zara Okan, frozen just behind the rows of chairs, eyes wide, hand clutched over her mouth. Then her gaze met Mrs. Rosaline Dyke, who sat stone-faced, her expression a mask of grace forced over fury. The older woman's hands were folded tightly in her lap, her jaw clenched as if to stop herself from standing and ripping the ceremony apart. Callista felt the weight of 300 stares, watching, judging, speculating. And at the center of it all, she and Clifton stood bound by silence and scandal. The officiant cleared his throat, unsure. Do you, Clifton King Dyke, take Callista Nwosu to be your lawfully wedded wife? Clifton didn't hesitate. I do. His voice was smooth, steady, loud enough to silence the whispers. Callista barely heard her own breath. This was madness. It was supposed to be Jesse standing beside her. This wasn't the plan. She had no vows prepared for Clifton, no expectations, no promises. And yet here he was, holding her hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her mind screamed at her to run. But something deeper, a buried ember of pride and dignity, forced her spine to straighten. When the officiant turned to her, the world faded. Do you, Callista Nwosu, take Clifton King Dyke? She looked at Clifton. He didn't blink. He simply gave the faintest nod, subtle, reassuring, like he was giving her a lifeline instead of a rope. I do, she whispered. A stunned murmur rippled through the room. Phones lifted, cameras clicked. The officiant, stumbling slightly, reached for the rings. Someone, perhaps Zara, handed him the box. Clifton slid the band onto her finger, a simple gold ring that belonged to no one and yet suddenly belonged to her. She did the same, her fingers trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. And then, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may. Clifton didn't wait. He didn't kiss her. Instead, he reached for her hand again, raised it with a quiet authority, and led her back down the aisle. The applause was polite, dazed, scattered. Callista walked like a statue, barely able to lift her feet as her veil fluttered around her shoulders. Her entire body was humming with disbelief. What had just happened? At the end of the aisle, Zara rushed toward her. Callista, what the actual... she started, her whisper half-scream. Clifton cut in. She needs space. We'll talk later. Zara bristled, but Callista caught her hand briefly. Please, I'll call you. Clifton led her toward a waiting black SUV parked discreetly at the back entrance of the hotel. As the doors closed and Lagos's traffic noise faded, silence stretched between them, like a wire ready to snap. Callista stared at her lap. Why did you do that? She whispered. Clifton was looking out the window, but his jaw flexed. Because my brother is a coward, and you deserve better than to be humiliated in front of the nation. That doesn't answer my question. He turned then, meeting her eyes. I did it to protect you, and to protect the Dyke name. Ah, there it was, the truth she'd been bracing for. So this was damage control? Yes, he said honestly. But not only that. Callista folded her arms across her lap. So what now? We just pretend to be married? No pretending, he said. We are married. Legally. You have my word. I won't ask anything of you. You can live in the estate, keep your independence, continue your art. We'll be partners in name only, if that's what you want. And what do you want, Clifton? There was a pause. He looked ahead again. I haven't decided yet. The SUV turned down the winding road to the Dyke family estate, an architectural marvel nestled in the most private corner of Banana Island. Callista's heart pounded harder. This wasn't her world. She didn't know how to belong in it. The car pulled to a stop before massive wrought iron gates. As they swung open, revealing manicured gardens and white marble columns, Callista gripped the door handle. Clifton opened his own door first, walked around, held her door open. Not like a lover, like a guardian. She stepped out, gown brushing the gravel. Staff members lined the driveway, pretending not to stare. Clifton said nothing as they entered the palatial foyer. White marble floors, chandeliers, walls lined with expensive artwork and oil portraits of the Dyke ancestors. Mrs. Rosaline was waiting. She stood like a queen on the landing, arms crossed, her gel twisted with tight precision, her beaded gown glistening with disapproval. Clifton, she said coolly, we need to talk. Now. Clifton's expression didn't change. Later. I won't let you drag our family name further down because of a sentimental impulse. He moved toward the stairs, Callista still beside him. Then don't follow us. Mrs. Rosaline's jaw dropped, but she said nothing. Clifton led Callista down the east wing, past a row of heavy doors. He paused at one, her new room. This is yours. You can redecorate if you want. We'll discuss arrangements tomorrow. She looked at the door, then at him. What happens now? She asked. You rest. I'll have someone bring your things. And after that, we figure out how to live with the choice we made. He gave a final nod, then turned and walked away. Callista stepped into the room, palatial, cold, sterile. Nothing like the messy, paint-splattered flat she'd once called home. She crossed to the balcony. The skyline of Lagos shimmered in the distance. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she touched the wedding band on her finger. This was not the life she wanted, but it was now hers, and she would own it. The Dyke estate, nestled in the heart of Banana Island, stood like a citadel of wealth, pristine, calculated, and impenetrable. With its sharp white columns, sprawling green lawns, and glossy marble floors that reflected the chandeliers like a palace of glass, it was everything Callista Nwosu had never imagined her life would touch. And yet here she was, stepping over the threshold of a house that felt more like a museum than a home. Her heels clicked softly as she walked through the East Wing corridor, following the maid who'd silently ushered her to her new room. Callista said nothing. She was too tired, too stunned. The events of the day still spun like a reel behind her eyes. The wedding that wasn't, Jesse's cruel note, Clifton's cold intervention at the altar, and the ring, the strange, heavy circle of gold that now sat on her finger. The room was palatial, easily 5 times the size of her former apartment. It was decorated in cream and gold, with high ceilings and an arched balcony door that opened to a view of the private garden. The bed was a queen-size monument with hand-carved posts. A faint scent of rosewood lingered in the air, and the silence was oppressive. The maid, a young woman in a pressed blue uniform, placed a folded wrapper at the edge of the bed and stepped back. "Madam, would you like anything else?" she asked in a crisp tone. Callista forced a small smile. "No, thank you." She waited until the door clicked shut before exhaling. Her body sagged. Her mind, however, refused to rest. She sank onto the bed and let her fingers trail the embroidery on the wrapper. It was soft, luxurious. Unlike anything she owned. Unlike anything she was, this world, the Dyke world, was cloaked in elegance, secrecy, and status. And she was an outsider wearing a crown made of whispers. She pulled out her phone. Messages. Dozens of them. Zara had texted almost a dozen times. Zara, where are you? Zara, is this real? Zara, call me, now. Zara, I'm worried, Cal. I don't trust Clifton. Callista stared at the screen. She knew Zara would say it straight. Her friend had never liked the Dyke family. Not Jesse, not his over-curated charm, and certainly not Clifton with his shadowy silence. But Callista also knew she wasn't ready for that conversation yet. She tossed the phone onto the nightstand and stood up. Her reflection in the massive wall mirror caught her attention. Her wedding gown still clung to her, like a secret she hadn't consented to share. The satin shimmered beneath the lights, pristine and beautiful, yet hollow. She tore it off, gently but urgently, and changed into the wrapper and a silk camisole she found in a drawer. Probably arranged for her by one of the housekeepers. She padded barefoot onto the balcony, letting the night breeze touch her face. From up here, the garden below looked like a magazine spread. Everything perfectly trimmed, controlled. She leaned on the railing, trying to breathe. Somewhere in the vastness of the house, she imagined Clifton in his study, buried in files, his shoulders straight, his jaw tight. He didn't strike her as the type of man to second-guess himself. What kind of man offered to marry a woman he barely knew to save her from shame? Was it really about protecting her, or was it about protecting the Dyke name? Or worse, was she a pawn? A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned. Yes. The door creaked open. It was Clifton. Still in his wedding agbada, although his cap was gone, and the first two buttons of his inner shirt were undone. His face was unreadable. I hope I'm not intruding, he said quietly. She shook her head. No, come in. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room before landing on her. I just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. I do, she said, her voice even. Thank you. A pause. Then, I've instructed the staff to give you privacy. You're free to come and go. You don't owe this house anything. Callista tilted her head. But I owe you now, don't I? Clifton's brow furrowed slightly. No, you don't. She gave a small, dry laugh. You really think anyone's going to believe that this marriage wasn't arranged? I can already hear the headlines. Jesse Dyke jilts lover. CEO brother swoops in to save the Dyke reputation. I'll be the punchline in every society group chat by tomorrow morning. You won't be, Clifton replied, his voice steady. I'll control the narrative. Callista raised an eyebrow. You mean like a press release? He didn't answer that. Instead, he looked at her. Really looked. You didn't deserve what Jesse did, he said. And for what it's worth, I didn't do this to make you feel trapped. You can leave whenever you want. I'll make sure you're taken care of. The mention of Jesse made her flinch. You knew he wasn't going to show, didn't you? A long silence. Yes. The air between them thickened. And you let me walk down that aisle? She asked, voice brittle. I hoped he'd change his mind. She folded her arms. He didn't. No, Clifton agreed, his jaw tightening. He didn't. They stood there in silence. Two strangers tied together by circumstance, shame and pride. Finally, Clifton turned toward the door. I'll be in my office if you need anything. She nodded, watching him leave. When the door shut, she collapsed into the armchair, tears pricking her eyes, not from heartbreak, but from exhaustion, from betrayal, from a deep, gnawing uncertainty about what tomorrow would look like. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going to be anyone's charity case. Not Clifton's, not the Dykes, not the tabloids, not even her own pity. She picked up her phone again, typed back to Zara. I'm okay. I'll explain everything soon. Just give me time. And then she placed the phone down and stared at the ring on her finger. If this marriage was going to define her, then she'd be the one writing the story. Not Jesse, not Mrs. Rosalind, not Clifton. Her. 3 days had passed since Callista Nosu's impromptu wedding to Clifton Yeen Ken Dyke, and the marble mansion of the Dyke estate still didn't feel real. She wandered the halls in the early morning light, the silence of the house pressing in on her like invisible arms. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The scent of fresh lilies in the foyer changed every day. The staff moved like shadows, efficient and nearly invisible. Meals appeared without requests. Someone had stocked her closet with high-end designer dresses, most with the tags still on. But none of it felt like hers. She spent most of her time in her room or on the balcony, watching the water shimmer beyond the estate walls. Her fingers longed for paintbrushes, charcoal, or canvas. But her art supplies were still packed in boxes at her old apartment in Surulere, a life that felt galaxies away. On the morning of the third day, she found a note slid under her door. "Thought you might like this. It's yours to use. Clifton." It was written in tight, even cursive on thick cream stationery. Alongside it was a slim silver key. Curious, Callista dressed quickly and followed the east corridor to the very end, where she found a room she hadn't noticed before. She slid the key into the lock, pushed open the heavy wooden door, and gasped. It was a sunroom, floor-to-ceiling glass on three sides, letting in the golden morning light. The fourth wall was lined with empty canvases, easels, jars of brushes, oil paints, acrylics, sketchbooks, all brand new. There was even a sound system softly playing Fela Kuti. Her throat tightened. Clifton had built her a studio. She stepped inside, running her hands across the smooth mahogany work table, the untouched brushes. It was beautiful, thoughtful, but also confusing. Why would a man who barely spoke to her know this was what she needed? What did it mean? She sat in the plush swivel chair and stared out at the garden, and for the first time in days, her fingers itched with creativity. She didn't pick up a brush, not yet, but she sat there breathing, allowing the silence to soften. A knock broke the stillness. Not one of the staff. This knock was impatient. She opened the door to find Zara Ocon, her best friend, dressed in a green linen jumpsuit, large shades on her head, and a fierce look in her eyes. "I bribed the security with gala and a 2,000 naira recharge card," Zara said, brushing past her. "Don't ask questions. We need to talk." Callista blinked. "Zara, save it." Zara tossed her handbag on the couch and faced her. "Are you seriously going to pretend this marriage is normal?" Callista closed the door gently, heart pounding. "I'm not pretending anything." Zara's eyes softened for a split second. "Cal, I've been worried sick. I watched you marry a man who hasn't said 5 full sentences to you. Do you even know who Clifton Dyke really is?" Callista sat on the edge of the studio table. "He's the CEO of Dyke Group Holdings, Jesse's older brother. That's all I know." Zara folded her arms. "He's also the man rumored to have single-handedly covered up a multi-billion-naira scandal in 2020 involving one of their subsidiary banks. No charges, no investigation. Just silence. That's power, Cal. Dangerous power." Callista looked away. "He's been kind. Distant, but kind." Zara's voice dropped. "Kind doesn't mean safe, and Jesse, don't even get me started. That rat is already feeding stories to the blogs." Callista turned sharply. "What?" Zara pulled out her phone and showed her the headline. "Was it always Clifton? Sources suggest bride chose power over love. Nija whispers blog." Callista scanned the article. Jesse hadn't been quoted directly, but the insinuations were clear. He was painting himself as the betrayed younger brother, the victim, while Sh's ambitious artist from nowhere was being cast as the manipulative schemer who used 2 brothers to climb the social ladder. Her stomach churned. "They're calling me a gold digger," she whispered. Zara nodded. "You need to get ahead of this." "I can't." Callista clenched her fists. "Any statement I make will look defensive. It'll only add fuel." Zara's eyes narrowed. "Then tell Clifton to handle it." Callista paused. "He already is. He said he would control the narrative. He's probably drawing up a PR campaign as we speak." Zara studied her. "And you trust him?" Callista looked away. "I don't know, but I trust what he did that day. I trust that he didn't let me fall." Zara exhaled. "All right, but stay sharp, Cal. This family doesn't operate like yours or mine. They calculate everything, even kindness. A faint knock sounded again. This one was softer. The door creaked open. A housemaid peeked in. "Madam, sorry to disturb. Madam Rosaline wants to see you in the parlor." Callista stiffened. Zara stood. "I'm coming with you." But the maid shook her head quickly. She said, "Alone." Callista gave Zara a look that said, "Don't worry, though." Her stomach twisted. She followed the maid through the halls, down the main staircase, into the parlor that smelled faintly of expensive roses and foreign polish. Mrs. Rosaline Dyke sat on a white velvet chaise, legs crossed, holding a teacup with the delicacy of someone who practiced etiquette as sport. She didn't rise, didn't smile. "Callista," she said evenly. "Sit." Callista obeyed, perching at the edge of a tufted chair. "I'll be direct," Rosaline said. "Whatever happened at that altar was unfortunate, but the marriage has been done. Now we must manage appearances." Callista swallowed. "I understand." "I don't think you do," Rosaline replied coolly. "This family's reputation was almost destroyed. My younger son disgraced us. But you stand in our house now. You bear our name. Do you know what that means?" Callista met her gaze. "It means I'm your daughter-in-law, not your puppet." Rosaline's eyes narrowed, her grip on the teacup tightening slightly. "You have spirit. I'll give you that." "Clifton chose this, not me," Callista added. Rosaline set down the cup. "Clifton rarely does anything without purpose. Just remember that." There was a pause. Then she said almost wistfully, "He was always the quiet one. Cold, hard to read, but loyal to a fault. If he chose you, it's for a reason." Callista stood. "I'm not here to play games, Ma. I just want to live in peace." Rosaline gave her a thin smile. "Peace is a privilege in this family. You'll learn that soon enough." Callista walked out of the room, her steps firm, heart pounding. Zara was waiting in the hallway. "How bad was it?" she asked. Callista gave a bitter laugh. "She thinks Clifton married me for a reason. She just doesn't know what it is." Zara raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" Callista didn't answer. Instead, she walked back toward the studio, heart full of questions. Behind these glass walls, everyone had secrets. But she'd find her truth, even if it shattered everything. The days after Rosaline Dyke's veiled warning passed like a slow, burning haze for Callista Nwosu. The Dyke estate remained unchanged in its perfection. Orchids rotated daily, polished marble floors reflecting sunlight like a mirror, and the ever-present scent of sandalwood wafting through air vents. But something in Callista had shifted. She spent hours in the studio Clifton had given her sanctuary behind glass, her one place untouched by judgment or politics. She didn't paint much yet, but she sketched, quietly, furiously. Faces she couldn't name, half-finished eyes, abstract swirls that reflected her tangled emotions. Zara's visit had unsettled her, but not because she didn't already know the truth. She did. The Dykes didn't move without motive. Even kindness had sharp edges. But Clifton, he was harder to read than anyone she had ever met. He was polite but distant, generous but unapproachable. Until one night, the veil cracked. It was around 10 p.m. A light Lagos rain tapped gently against the glass panes of the studio. Callista, still in her oversized nightshirt, couldn't sleep. Restlessness tugged at her, so she went downstairs, barefoot, tiptoeing across the marble like a ghost. She was craving chamomile tea, her favorite, something she doubted this fortress even stocked. To her surprise, she found the kitchen softly lit. Clifton was there. Not in his usual sharply tailored suit, but in joggers and a plain black t-shirt. He was standing by the counter, staring into a steaming mug, his other hand gripping the back of a chair. He looked tired, human. He glanced up. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head. "Neither could you, it seems." He gestured toward the kettle. "Water's still hot." She hesitated, then patted over. Her eyes caught the label on the box beside him. Chamomile. Her gaze snapped to him. You stock this? He gave a slight shrug. Figured you might look for it eventually. There was something in his tone, almost shy. It softened her, just a little. They stood in silence while she poured hot water over the bag. The scent was comforting, familiar. She turned to thank him again, but he was staring at her sketchbook, which she hadn't realized she'd brought downstairs. It was open on the counter where she dropped it earlier. He tapped one of the pages. You drew this? She nodded. Just something rough. I couldn't sleep, so... It's not rough. His voice was quiet. It's raw and beautiful. Callista blinked. Clifton Dyke did not offer compliments lightly. He sipped his tea, then moved toward the large kitchen window. She joined him. Banana Island glimmered beyond the estate, rows of dimmed mansions and streetlights mirrored on rain-speckled glass. It was peaceful, almost unreal. He broke the silence again. Do you ever feel like you don't belong here? She turned to him, surprised. All the time, she admitted. This house is beautiful, but I keep waiting for it to spit me out. Clifton chuckled softly. Same. She tilted her head. You? You built this life. Not really, he said. My father built it. My mother curated it. I just keep the machine running. She stared at him. The powerful CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms with silence, now standing barefoot in a kitchen at midnight, confessing his alienation. Why me? She asked suddenly. Why not let me walk away that day? He didn't answer right away. He took another sip, then said, Because I saw something in your eyes I recognized. Pain, but pride too. You reminded me of myself once. She swallowed. That's not love, Clifton. I never said it was. Their eyes met. There was no romance in his stare, just a weight that mirrored hers. But I don't regret it, he added. Neither did she. Not entirely. She placed her mug down. Good night, Clifton. Callista, he called softly as she turned to leave. She paused. Zara was right to warn you, he said. The Dykes aren't easy to survive. She gave him a long look. I'm not here to survive. I'm here to live. And with that, she walked away. The next afternoon, a courier arrived. He handed Callista a sealed envelope. The label, Private for Mrs. Callista Dyke. Curious, she took it to the studio. Inside was a flash drive and typed note. I thought you deserved to know what really happened before the wedding. A friend. Her hands shook as she plugged it into the laptop on the studio desk. A video file loaded. It was grainy, a surveillance recording from a hallway. Callista recognized the venue, the Eden Royale Hotel. The date stamp showed it was from the morning of the wedding. The footage showed Jessie Dyke pacing near a dressing room. Mrs. Rosaline appeared seconds later. She was speaking rapidly, gesturing toward the phone in her hand. Jessie grabbed it, read something, then threw it against the wall. There was no audio, but their body language screamed fury. Then, another woman appeared. Tall, slim, flawless skin. Callista recognized her immediately. Nena Uba, a rising Nollywood actress, rumored to have once dated Jessie. Rosaline turned to her, spoke. Nena crossed her arms. Jessie moved closer, shouting. Nena slapped him. Hard. He staggered back, then stormed down the hallway, disappearing from view. The video ended there. Callista leaned back in her chair, dazed. Jessie hadn't abandoned her because he was afraid. He'd been fighting for something else, someone else, and Rosaline had known. She'd tried to clean it up, probably begged him to still go through with the wedding. The betrayal deepened. Callista sat in stunned silence until the door creaked open. It was Clifton. She looked up, her voice hoarse. Did you know? He stepped inside, glanced at the laptop, then nodded. Yes. You didn't tell me? I was protecting you. She stood. From the truth? He met her gaze. From pain that wouldn't change anything. She wanted to scream, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered, Next time, let me choose what to feel. Clifton's jaw tensed. Fair enough. And then, softly, He added, I'm sorry. She didn't know what hurt more. He'd kept the truth, or that she believed he truly was sorry. As he turned to leave, she said, Clifton? He paused. Thank you for the tea in the studio and not letting me fall. He nodded. Just once. Then walked away. And for the first time since the wedding, Callista felt her heart, guarded and raw, begin to shift. She wasn't in love, but something was starting. Something real. The rain in Banana Island came gently that morning, drizzling like silk against the mansion's tall glass windows. It soaked the manicured lawns of the Dyke estate and gathered in tiny silver puddles along the cobblestone paths. Callista Mosu sat in the studio Clifton had gifted her, barefoot in a loose Ankara blouse, charcoal smudging her fingertips. For the first time since her sudden marriage, she was painting. The canvas in front of her was raw, a burst of crimson against a backdrop of muted earth tones. It didn't represent anything specific. It was emotion, rage, betrayal, confusion, hope. Her hands moved with purpose, guided by instinct more than intention. She barely noticed the time pass. It was nearly noon when she heard the soft tap on the glass door. Clifton stood outside, a simple white shirt rolled up at the sleeves, dark trousers, his face unreadable as ever. Callista opened the door. I didn't mean to interrupt, he said. You didn't. He stepped inside, gaze drifting to the half-finished painting. I like it, he said quietly. It looks like something breaking open. She tilted her head. It's not finished yet. Neither are you, he said, then caught himself, tone shifting. I mean, we're all becoming. She studied him. Was that supposed to be comforting? He smirked. It was supposed to be honest. There was an odd warmth in the exchange, less awkward than usual. Callista stepped aside and offered him the seat opposite her. He hesitated, then sat. Do you paint? She asked. Clifton looked amused. No, I'd ruin any canvas I touch. Draw? He shook his head. But I write. She blinked. You write? He nodded, a bit sheepish. Essays, short stories, a few unfinished novels. You? The man who gives one-word responses at dinner meetings? He chuckled. That's why I write them down. No interruptions. She leaned forward, curious. What kind of stories? Ones where the good guys don't always win. But they try anyway. Something in his tone, dry but gentle, touched her. Will you let me read one? Maybe, he said, eyes dancing, if you let me buy one of your paintings. She smiled for the first time in days. Buy? You already own the house. Yes, but I want to support the artist, he said, not the wife. The room quieted again, but the silence was different now, thicker with curiosity, laced with possibility. Callista turned back to the canvas. You really do surprise me. I've spent years being exactly who everyone expected, he replied. Maybe it's time to become something else. They sat like that for a while. No labels, no tension. Just two people finding shelter in shared silence. Later that evening, Callista wandered into the library. She hadn't explored this part of the estate yet, and when she stepped inside, it took her breath away. The room was enormous, lined from floor to ceiling with books, novels, philosophy, old Nigerian poetry collections. A spiral staircase curled up into a second-level gallery. In the center sat a grand oak desk, and on it, a single journal. It was open. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Clifton's. Neat, deliberate, intense. She shouldn't have read it, but curiosity outweighed hesitation. There are moments I wake up and don't recognize the man I've become. Not the CEO, not the son, just the boy who once wanted to write, to be heard, not feared. Then I see her, Callista, and something unfamiliar stirs, a softness I thought I buried long ago. Callista inhaled sharply. She closed the journal, heart thudding. The words weren't meant for her eyes, but they struck something deep. Clifton had walls, steel and glass, But inside, he was searching too, just like her. She stepped back from the desk and turned, only to find him standing at the doorway. He didn't speak, neither did she, but he knew what she'd read. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Clifton broke the silence. "I don't regret writing it." Her throat tightened. "I wasn't looking for secrets." "I know." He crossed the room, his steps slow. "But you found one anyway." She lowered her eyes. "Do you want me to forget I saw it?" "No," he said, voice soft. "I want you to remember that I'm not made of granite." She met his gaze. "Neither am I." He nodded. "That's what scares me." Then before she could respond, he left. The next day, Callista received a message from Zara. "Zara, met someone at a party who knows the Dykes well. There's more to Jesse's exit than just Nena. I think someone paid her to show up. I'm digging." Callista stared at the message, heart pounding. Was Jesse's humiliation orchestrated? If so, by whom? Rosaline? Or Clifton? That evening, as she sat in the garden sketching one of the hibiscus trees, Clifton joined her. He brought 2 mugs of cocoa, set one beside her without a word, and sat across from her in silence. She watched him, trying to decide whether to ask the question buzzing in her mind, but the peace of the moment was too rare to disturb. So instead, she said softly, "Thank you for the cocoa and for not being granite today." Clifton smiled, small but real. "You're welcome, Callista." And in that quiet, beneath the stars, they sat together, still strangers in some ways, but no longer so distant. Their marriage had begun in chaos. But this was the beginning of something else. The Harmattan breeze that swept across Banana Island carried a stillness that felt almost prophetic. Callista Nwosu stood in the Dyke Estates studio, staring at a half-finished portrait on her easel. It wasn't abstract like her previous work. This time she had painted him, Clifton Dyke. She hadn't meant to, but the brushstrokes had taken on a life of their own. A strong jawline, eyes that always seemed to say too little and too much at once, broad shoulders drawn in charcoal shadow. It was as though her hands had sketched what her heart had refused to name. The painting wasn't flattering. It was raw, honest, and it terrified her. Because despite everything, Jesse's betrayal, the forced vows, the cold mansion, she was beginning to feel something for the man behind the mask. A knock pulled her from her thoughts. It was Zara Okon. Again. Her expression was tense, her phone already in her hand. "Cal, we need to talk." Callista let her in and shut the door. Zara didn't waste time. She opened a message on her screen and showed Callista a forwarded email from one of her media sources. Anonymous tip. Nana Uba was paid by Rosaline Dyke's personal assistant 3 days before the wedding. Confidential transfer. Could be linked to prearranged fallout with Jesse Dyke. Callista blinked. "Wait, what?" Zara's voice was low. "Your mother-in-law may have sabotaged her own son. Deliberately." "That doesn't make any sense," Callista whispered. Zara stepped closer. "Oh, it does. Rosaline knew Jesse wasn't fit to lead the company. Knew his relationship with you was fragile. But Clifton? Steady. Silent. Controllable. She needed a public moment. A shift. So she triggered a scandal that only Clifton could fix." Callista felt like the ground shifted beneath her. "So, I was the bait?" Zara nodded. "Not just that. The solution, too." Callista stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the desk. "Does Clifton know?" Zara paused. "That's the part I couldn't confirm. But if he does, and didn't tell you..." Callista shook her head. "I need to hear it from him." She didn't wait. Clifton was in the estate's library, seated in his usual leather chair, a book in hand. He looked up when she entered, immediately registering the storm in her eyes. "What's wrong?" She walked straight to him, the accusation already in her voice. "Did you know?" His brow furrowed. "Know what?" "That your mother paid Nena Uba to show up at the wedding. That she planned Jesse's humiliation to force you into taking control?" Clifton stood slowly. Where did you hear that? So it's true, she said, more statement than question. He exhaled deeply. I suspected it. I didn't have proof. But you knew something, and you didn't tell me. I didn't want to drag you deeper into their games. You dragged me into this marriage, she snapped. Into this house. I deserve honesty, Clifton. His face was taut, controlled. Yes, you do. Then why didn't you say anything? Clifton turned away, pacing once. Because I didn't want you to think I was just like them. I was trying to protect you from the filth that runs through this family. Callista swallowed. But you didn't protect me. You caged me with silence. He turned back, his voice strained. I've never been good at trusting people. Everyone I've ever let in has used it against me. My mother, my ex, even Jesse. And me? She asked quietly. Do you think I'll betray you too? He didn't answer. Callista stepped forward, eyes glistening. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to marry into your empire or fix your brother's mess. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought maybe you were more than the reputation. Maybe this thing between us wasn't just survival. Clifton's voice dropped, almost a whisper. Neither did I. He reached out, but stopped short. I'm sorry, Callista, for not telling you, for not trusting you when you've done nothing but show me grace. She looked at his outstretched hand. Then prove it. How? Let me in, she said. Tell me something real, something only I know. A pause. Then he nodded slowly. Come with me. They left the main house and walked silently through a side corridor to a part of the estate she hadn't explored. Clifton unlocked a private door and led her into a dimly lit room. It was filled with canvases, hundreds of them, all covered in white cloths. He pulled one aside. A painting of a boy, maybe 9 or 10, wide eyes, dusty feet, holding a cracked school bag. The background was agave maybe, row houses, red sand, rusted roofs. That's you, she whispered. He nodded. Before Dyke Group Holdings, before my father's obsession. My mother wanted to erase this version of me, but I kept him here. You painted this? She asked, stunned. I did. There was vulnerability in his voice now. No CEO, no control, just a man remembering a boy. I wanted to become someone powerful enough that no one would ever make me feel like that kid again, he said. But in doing that, I lost him. Callista reached out and touched the painting's frame. He's still here, in this. Their eyes met. Then slowly she placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. And for once, he let her. That night, Callista couldn't sleep. The house was quiet. Even the wind had calmed. She stepped out onto her balcony and saw a silhouette standing in the garden. It was Rosaline Dyke. She was speaking to someone, a man, tall, thin, wearing all black. Callista leaned forward, hidden behind a curtain. Rosaline's voice carried faintly in the breeze. She's getting too close. Keep watching her, and if she finds out about the land deal, end it. The man nodded once, then slipped into the shadows. Callista's heart pounded. What land deal? Who was the man? And why was she the target? The facade was cracking, and the game was far from over. The next morning, Banana Island's skies were clear, but Callista Nwosu's mind was anything but. She stood in the studio staring blankly at her unfinished canvas. Her hands trembled slightly as she dipped a brush into ochre paint, but her mind wasn't on color or technique. It was on what she'd witnessed the night before. Mrs. Rosaline Dyke, a shadowed figure, and the words, if she finds out about the land deal, end it. Callista hadn't told Clifton. Not yet. She didn't know if she could. Her heart wanted to believe he wasn't involved, but her head, the part trained by years of guarding herself, was less naive. She'd seen how easily power twisted people. Callista abandoned the painting and slipped quietly out of the studio. She needed answers, real ones, and she knew exactly where to start. Rosaline Dyke's private study was on the north side of the mansion, off limits to staff, visitors, and apparently even family. But the housekeeper had once mentioned that Rosaline kept all her financial documents in that tomb with the gold doorknobs. Callista waited until late morning, when Rosaline had left for a spa appointment in Ikoyi before slipping inside. The room was immaculate, heavy drapes, gleaming mahogany furniture, and an unsettling portrait of Rosaline herself hanging above the fireplace. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and coal perfume. Callista moved quickly, rifling through drawers and cabinet shelves. Most were filled with invitations, guest lists, and luxury catalogs, but the last drawer on the left, the one that stuck slightly, held something different. A locked file folder. She picked the lock with a slender paperclip, something she'd learned from watching her father during his print shop days when customers lost keys to their drawer boxes. Inside, she found maps, receipts, contracts. And then one word stopped her cold. Okunrin Waterside Project Phase 3. She knew that name. It was a controversial real estate development near the EPE coastline involving massive land reclamation, suspected displacement of low-income communities, and rumored bribes to government officials. Newspapers had reported it had been shelved months ago due to environmental pushback. But these documents showed continued construction plans and listed Dyke Group Holdings as the hidden investor. Callista's breath caught. Clifton had told her the company hadn't touched that deal, that it was a stain they refused to be part of. But here it was, signed by Rosaline Dyke, and co-signed by Jesse, not Clifton. A sharp creak jolted her from the documents. She froze. Footsteps. The study door opened. It was Clifton. They stared at each other across the room, her holding the file, him standing at the threshold, lips parted in surprise. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice low but steady. Callista didn't lie. "I saw your mother last night. In the garden. She was meeting a man. Said something about ending it if I found out about the land deal." Clifton stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "What exactly did you hear?" "I heard enough." She placed the folder on the desk. "You told me your company wasn't involved in Okunrin, but this says otherwise." He picked up the folder, flipped through it, then sighed. "I didn't sign this." "But your family did." "Yes. And you didn't think I should know?" Clifton's jaw clenched. "I was trying to keep you safe. By keeping me in the dark?" He tossed the folder onto the desk and ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't just a land deal, Callista. It's politics, money, power brokers. If this gets out, the company crumbles. My mother will lose everything. Jesse will be buried in debt. And You what?" "I'll be the one who let it happen on my watch." Callista stepped forward. "You're not your mother or Jesse, but you can't hide behind silence forever." Clifton met her gaze. For the first time, he looked genuinely uncertain. "Human. You should have told me," she whispered, "from the start. I was afraid you'd leave." "Why?" "Because I'm not sure I'd survive it," he said softly. The words landed with quiet devastation. She didn't respond. Couldn't. So instead, she reached for his hand. For the first time, he didn't pull away. Later that night, they sat together on the garden bench. The very place Rosaline had stood the night before, plotting in the dark. Callista leaned her head against Clifton's shoulder, and he let her. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. When the storm comes, and it will, don't shut me out." He turned his head, eyes on hers. "I promise." She nodded, pressing her cheek to his shirt. But neither of them saw the blinking red light hidden beneath the garden lantern. A camera. Watching. And somewhere beyond the gates of Banana Island, a journalist from Nijascope Weekly was preparing an expose that would rip the Dyke empire wide open. By 6 a.m. the next morning, Banana Island was buzzing, not with car horns or morning joggers, but with scandal. The headline blazed across every major blog and media outlet in Lagos. Exclusive. Dyke Group secretly bankrolling controversial Okunrin. Waterside Project leaked documents expose CEO's family ties. There it was. Scans of the very documents Callista had uncovered. Blueprints, contracts, land acquisition bribes. A red circle around the name Rosalind Dyke. Another around Jesse Dyke. And accompanying all of it, grainy photos of Callista and Clifton in the garden, hand in hand. As you know, the narrative took off like wildfire. Callista Nwosu, former freelance artist, now Dyke-in-law, at center of billion-naira real estate cover-up. From canvas to conspiracy, how one Surulere girl climbed into the heart of Banana Island's dirtiest deal. Callista scrolled through the comments beneath a Nijascope post. She was a setup from the start. Clifton married her to clean house. Open your eyes. She's the brain behind the scandal, trust me. Art school babe turns Dyke devil? Her fingers trembled. She tossed the phone onto the bed like it had burned her. She barely noticed when the bedroom door swung open. Clifton entered, phone to his ear. Pull out of the Lecky merger. No, I don't care if it was 80% done. We're not giving the board one more reason to panic. He ended the call and turned to her, face taut. It's everywhere. She nodded. They have the documents, she said quietly. The ones I found in your mother's office. I know. The only thing they don't have yet is confirmation from me. Callista looked at him. Are you going to deny it? No, he said, surprising her. I'm going to bury it, properly, before it takes everything down with it. He sat down beside her. The board has called an emergency meeting, he said. And my mother, she's spinning. She tried to set me up, Callista whispered, voice trembling. She planted a camera in the garden. She knew I'd find that folder. Clifton's jaw clenched. And now she wants to hang it on you. There was a long silence. Then Callista asked the question that had been haunting her since dawn. Do you think I did this? Clifton didn't look away. No, but they will. She stood pacing. I never wanted this. I just wanted peace. A studio. A man I could learn to trust. And now? He asked softly. She turned, her voice sharper than intended. Now I don't know who I'm married to. He stood too, a storm in his eyes. You're married to a man who made a mistake trusting his family more than his gut. But I am not my mother, and I won't let you take the fall for this. He grabbed his jacket. I have a press conference at Dyke Group Holdings in 2 hours. You're going public? Yes, I'll own what's mine, but not what isn't. He walked to the door, then stopped. I want you there, Callista. She hesitated. Why? Because they need to see the woman I married isn't weak, or corrupt, or afraid. She looked up, uncertain. And if I am afraid? He softened. Then stand next to me anyway. Let them fear you. 2 hours later, Callista stood backstage at the Dyke Group headquarters auditorium. Reporters packed the space like vultures. Cameras set up, microphones clipped. Clifton stood at the podium, composed in a tailored navy suit. He glanced toward her, eyes steady. She nodded once. He began. There's been speculation about Dyke Group Holdings' involvement in the Oakenrin Waterside project. Let me clarify. The room fell deathly silent. My mother, Rosalind Dyke, and my brother Jesse Dyke were involved in a private side agreement that used our company's influence without board approval. I was not made aware of this until 2 days ago. The flashbulbs exploded. But I am not here to deflect. I take full responsibility for what happens under my name. And effective immediately, my mother and brother are being removed from all executive roles within DGH. The crowd erupted. One reporter shouted, "What about your wife? Wasn't she involved in leaking the documents?" Clifton turned to Callista, who stepped forward. The lights were blinding. Her heart thudded. My name is Callista Nwosu Dyke, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. I found those documents after overhearing a conversation. I chose not to sell them to the press. Someone else did. Another reporter jumped in. Then why are you standing here? Because I won't be a scapegoat, she said. I didn't marry Clifton for power or position. And if telling the truth costs us everything, then so be it. Clifton stepped closer, took her hand. This is my partner, not a pawn. They stood there hand in hand against a wall of cameras, questions, and noise. But for a moment, it was silent between them. Oh, real. Back at the estate, Mrs. Rosaline was packing. The board had forced her out. Her driver waited at the front. Her jewelry sat forgotten in a box on the chaise. She glanced around the house she'd once ruled, and for the first time, felt the weight of irrelevance. Jessie had fled to South Africa that morning. The papers hinted at an investigation. And Callista, the girl she'd called a nobody, was now the face of Dyke Group's rebirth. Rosaline placed one final envelope on Clifton's desk before she left. Inside it was a handwritten note. I underestimated her. You didn't. Perhaps you are more like your father than I thought. That night, Callista and Clifton stood together on the garden porch. The wind was warm. The chaos had settled. For now. I didn't think I could, she whispered. Stand there. Speak like that. I did, he said. She looked at him. You still want to be married to me? After all this? He reached for her hand. Now more than ever. She leaned into him. And in the silence, beneath the soft rustle of palm trees and the hum of second chances, Callista knew. They had survived the storm. But it was what they built next that would define everything. 1 month later, the scandal had dulled to a low hum. The headlines had shifted focus, from chaos to redemption. Dyke Group Holdings was rebuilding under Clifton's quiet leadership. Transparency initiatives. Community restitution for the Oaken Wren project. The company's new slogan, Truth Builds Stronger, flashed across screens in elevators, airports, and high-rise lobbies. But while Lagos moved on, Callista Nwosu Dyke had been painting. Fiercely, fearlessly. She stood now in a crisp linen jumpsuit and gold bangles, inside a sun-drenched gallery in Victoria Island, surrounded by canvases born of heartbreak, healing, and power. It was her first solo exhibition since the wedding, and this time, no one dared to call her a gold digger. The gallery buzzed with elite guests, journalists, and collectors, but her eyes kept drifting to the man in the far corner. Clifton. He wore a navy traditional agbada with silver embroidery, hands tucked in front, watching her like she was the only thing that mattered in the room. When their eyes met, he gave a soft smile. She returned it, then turned back to a guest asking about one of her pieces, an abstract burst of black, red, and gold. What do you call this one? The woman asked, peering over her glasses. Callista smiled. The storm we survived. After the event, they returned to the Dyke estate, not as strangers pretending to be partners, but as something real, something forged. Callista kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the velvet couch in the lounge. I think I smiled for 5 straight hours. Clifton poured her a glass of Zobo and handed it over. You were brilliant. She looked at him. I was terrified. And you still stood there. That's what brilliance looks like. She sipped, then asked, How are things with the board? Stable, for now, he said. They're still skeptical, but they trust actions more than words, and we've given them both. He sat beside her. Your paintings. They hit something. You didn't hold back. I stopped painting for approval, she said. I started painting to breathe. There was a pause. Then Clifton reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. She stared at it. Clifton. It's not what you think, he said with a teasing grin. Inside was a single vintage key, worn, heavy, and brass. She lifted it slowly. What's this? A studio, he said. In the heart of Ikoyi, 2 floors, skylight. Your name on the title deed, no strings. Her eyes watered. Why? He reached for her hand. Because this marriage started with a rescue, then became a partnership. But now, I want it to be choice. Every day, from both of us. Callista set the key down and cupped his face. Then let's choose it. A week later, the Dyke estate felt different. Rosaline had left Lagos entirely, retreating to a private villa in South Africa. Jessie's name was a whisper, mostly in tabloid rumors. But Callista had made peace with the past. She had moved her easels into the new Ikoyi studio and started mentoring two young artists from Surulere. Her story had become something more than a headline. It had become inspiration. And Clifton? He was learning to breathe outside of the boardroom. Slowly. On Sundays, he read her poems. On weekdays, they cooked dinner together, though his igusi still needed work. One evening, as they walked through the garden where it all began, Callista reached for his hand. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Jesse hadn't left me at the altar?" she asked. Clifton glanced at her. "I would have sat there in silence, wishing it had been me." She stopped walking. "So, it always was?" He nodded. "From the first time I saw you sketch at that fundraiser, you didn't look at anyone, just your notebook, like you belonged in a different world, and I wanted to know what that world felt like." She leaned in, kissed him gently. "Now you do." They stood beneath the lanterns, arms wrapped around each other. No secrets, no shame. Just the canvas of two lives intertwined, not by scandal or status, but by truth and love. Real, earned. 1 year later, the air in Banana Island felt lighter. The mansion that once whispered of control and cold traditions now rang with a different kind of energy, one born of laughter, color, and soft, shared silences. Callista stood barefoot in the new wing of the estate. Her studio had expanded, now a bright space filled with sun, plants, and paintings that pulsed with life. On the eastern wall hung her most famous piece yet, Becoming Us. It had debuted at the Dakar Biennale and was now being negotiated for permanent display at the National Museum in Lagos. She stepped back from a canvas in progress, her hands smudged with paint, when Clifton appeared in the doorway. Still tall, still quiet. But now, when he smiled, it reached his eyes. He held a steaming mug of ginger tea in one hand and a small wrap box in the other. "For the artist who changed my entire blueprint," he said softly. She took the tea first, then unwrapped the box. Inside was a tiny pair of hand-painted baby shoes, white with yellow suns on the toes. Her breath caught. He looked at her. "You're not the only one who paints now." Her laugh broke like sunlight. "So this is how you tell me." Clifton nodded, pulling her into his arms. "Our next masterpiece." They stood there, tangled in the quiet joy of shared creation. One heart, two souls, and a tiny life on the way. Later that evening, as twilight draped itself across the estate, they sat on the balcony together. Below, the garden swayed in the wind, no longer a place of secrets, but of serenity. Callista rested her head on Clifton's shoulder. "Do you think the world sees us differently now?" "I don't care," he said. "The only legacy I care about is the one we build in this house, with truth, with love." She smiled. And in that moment, surrounded by art, healing, and the slow, steady hum of forever, Callista knew she had not just survived the Dyke name. She had redefined it. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.